When I tell you it gave me a crisis, you have no idea. Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, I am Yvette and I moved to the UK 2.5 years ago and I'm documenting my experience. So I'm taking it old school, we're back on the sofa, which is kind of where my whole YouTube channel started, was me sitting on a sofa chatting to... But yeah, I wanted to tell you about a life revelation I've had thanks to Jimmy Carr. Recently, I was listening to a podcast. Firstly, I was listening to The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. Fantastic podcast. If you don't already listen to it, he interviews other entrepreneurs or celebrities and kind of traces their success, their failures, and just like a life story of them. So it's quite interesting, particularly if you get a good guest on. And so he had Jimmy Carr on, and I listened to it, and like this podcast was like amazing. It was Jimmy's life. Jimmy Carr, obviously, he's very funny. I've always known him more of a host than like a stand-up. Obviously his stand-up is successful. I'm more of a fan of the hosting, not that his stand-up is bad. But his shtick is that he's a dick, basically. You know, playfully so, but when you're a host, you know, you kind of neg all the contestants and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of like all I knew of him. And then I watched this podcast with him and it was like completely different person. He was like, this make me think, anything I say now is going to be like, oh, well, he's not like that on telly. He was just very like articulate, in-depth, introspective, enlightened, educated, friendly, kind, and like all these kind of things, which is not to say he's not those things, but that's just not what he presents in his stand-up or his TV presenting. I found that incredibly fascinating, and the reason he was on there was because he was advertising his book or promoting his book. And so I listened to this podcast and it was like so in-depth, so insightful, so mind-bending that I was like, I gotta buy the book. Like if this is just the podcast about the book, imagine the book. And when I tell you it gave me a crisis, you have no idea. I don't know of my life circumstances, like just at a bad time, but so it starts off, firstly, this book, I've read a lot of, it's so hard to explain. I highly recommend you read it if you're in a good mental space. If you're in a bad place, it's always good to read, I guess. The book is half self-help book, half biography, half philosophy, and half psychology. I know that doesn't add up in any way, but there's no maths in this, so that's fine. So yeah, he talks about, there's quotes throughout by important people, powerful people, opinion leaders, gives an anecdote of his life, and then it'll be tied up in with like a self-help lesson and what he could learn from that and how that would play into self-help. And it was so fascinating. And so if you didn't know, Jimmy Carr, I found so many parallels as well. I was like, am I Jimmy Carr? Like if he was dead, I'd be convinced I was reincarnated. Like it was weird things. So he I think he had a single mum. He doesn't have a relationship with his dad, so he grew up with his mum, who wasn't well, and then he kind of was her stand-in as the father of the house, so he was supporting her. He was dyslexic, as am I. He had a writer for his A-levels, as did I, which I didn't like, this is so stupid to say back, and this isn't even about this, but like, I am dyslexic, I found out in university. And in high school, my handwriting was so messy that they would get me a writer, not because I was dyslexic, just because my handwriting was illegible. And the same thing happened to him. And I'm now realizing that scenario was like literally, that should have diagnosed me with dyslexia, but it didn't. That or I should have become a doctor. And that's why I'm not the comedian. But yes, so he is dyslexic. Then he gets through that, overcomes that, goes to Cambridge, studies, I think it was business, I'm not sure what he studied. Then he goes to work for Shell as a marketing exec in oil, which is obviously problematic. And he talks about, there's so many things that caused my crisis. Number one, he said he was 25 and he decided, his mum passed away, I think that would have been the catalyst. He decided to quit his job and go into stand-up full-time. And he said at 25, doing that, making that choice to deviate from life's plan was the first time he ever made his own choice. And that's when I realized my life, I was 26, I think, when I decided to move abroad. Took me a while to actually move, but that was when I made the choice mentally. And that was the first time I'd ever made a choice, because you're told you go to school, you're not really having a choice in that. Then if you're, you know, successful at school, they say go to university. So you don't really, it's not much of a choice. It's either you're good at school, you go to university, or not good. It's like there's no choice in that. At least there wasn't for me. Maybe you guys are more enlightened than I am. Then I was with my partner, who obviously I love, Daniel. There's no regrets there. But like, I've known him since childhood and we dated, so we're just like, but there is a choice there. Then we got married though, which was not a choice. That was definitely like family pressure, so like not necessarily a choice. Then you have a job and you're saving, so you buy a house, and obviously not in this day and age, but at the time. So all these massive life choices I had made weren't choices at all, and that wrecked me a little bit. And the first time I made something for myself that was not from family or society or, you know, education system telling me to do something, was to move abroad and do something selfishly for me and not for societal expectations. And that was incredible. And then, so that made me like just like re-evaluate my whole life. He also has anxiety, and so one thing he also said that I think, you know, this is an opinion, not like clinical, but he said anxiety is a symptom of a creative mind, is that, which makes sense, because I have like, I say it's like an improv group in my head coming up with like every worst scenario, which is a creative brain, is to come up with all the worst case scenarios. You're like, well, what if an asteroid hit the building and killed me right now? Like, it has to be some level of creativity to be like, what if dinosaurs weren't really extinct and they came out of the pipes and killed me? Like, that's, you know, maybe I've got more issues than just anxiety, but that's not the point. I guess using your creativity elsewhere, or at least that could be a good way of managing anxiety, to have a creative outlet, since it's like the main thing that wrecked my life, which I think is really interesting. And then the main thing that wrecked my life. So everything I've said up to now kind of blew up my past, and then the thing that blew up my future is, there's a quote in here. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, sorry, this is gonna turn into story time, but I'm gonna read you an excerpt from the book. Let's talk about, oh, I'm probably gonna mispronounce it, so I picked probably the worst paragraph, but you'll Nietzsche. Let's talk about Nietzsche. Nietzsche had a concept called eternal recurrence. This sounds super fancy, but really it boils down to one question. If you had to relive your life over and over again for all of eternity, would that be a blessing or a curse? What? That wrecked me, because I was like, if I had to live my life up until this point like a Groundhog Day every day, I would consider it a curse. Not to say like, things I enjoy doing, this, I have to fit this in around a lot of stuff I do not enjoy. And so just the idea of, you know, corporate structures, capitalism, climate change, university, school, like you're just sitting tests about things that don't really matter. And I say that, sorry to any students watching this, but I did so many courses and so many classes on like managing change, like they don't help me in any way, shape or form. So it's like, I feel like there's so much in, you know, you do business plans and you do all sorts of things and reviews and financial reviews and quarterly earnings reports and all this sort of stuff. And you're like, none of this actually makes any tangible difference to my life, like, or anyone's. We're just talking. Just a lot of noise. That blew my mind. And then I was like, I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna go live. I'm gonna go on a Buddhist retreat. I'm out. Peace out. And then I was like, I don't have any money, so I'm not gonna do that. And so then I was like, because I realized what I would love is to have a job, I guess not even a job. I wanna have my work or my job be independent from money, and that's never been a thing. Baby's also passionate, as you can see. I'm just trying to get you the garden you deserve, Bambi. Yeah, so if I And then I was thinking about like, what jobs would I do that would make me truly happy? And it was the first time I'd ever asked myself that question without considering the financial impacts, you know? For example, I would have loved to do journalism at school or for university. I didn't do it because of the rise of BuzzFeed and like killing off journalism as an industry wasn't a viable career for me. So I didn't do it. And then there's been so many things like that, or like I would just love to go to study like philosophy at university, but that's not financially viable for me, so I don't do it. So I haven't found the answer to this, by the way, I'm just dumping on you. So it's, I guess, yeah, finding what I enjoy doing, what I'm good at doing, and that gets me money is a really bad, nothing crosses into that makes me money bit, unfortunately. Binge watching Euphoria on TV doesn't earn me any money, and that's not helpful. So I'm still figuring that out, but that was my epiphany, or how can I take my money that I do have and put it into investments that will supply me with money so I can just go around and be a dick and have fun. And then it set me down a bigger existential crisis. So the next part isn't covered in the book, but then I was listening to, there's this whole anti-work thing that blew up on Reddit. And I think the main thing with that is like, in that, you know, capitalism as a whole is that if you go and you create more value than you were paid. That is literally the structure. It's a pyramid scheme of capitalism. So I was like, annoying. And then I was like, okay, so if I'm not very good at painting, clearly, oh, you can't see it, but there's art behind me. Say I went and I spent all day in a studio and I was painting, and I came home and I was like, oh, I was at work all day. That would not be as respected as someone who was in a factory all day, in terms of like sacrifice and suffering. And I feel like there is this like philosophical saying of like, philosophical theory of sacrifice adds meaning. So the best way I can explain this is like, if you make a loaf of bread, which we all did in phase 1 of the pandemic, you will value that bread and treat it better and savor it longer than if you went and bought some bread from Tesco for £1, because it was your sacrifice of time and energy, not necessarily discomfort. You may have enjoyed making the bread, but you'll still inherently value it more because of your sacrifices to make it. So you can apply that to life, and I think that's a lot of the time, it's getting so philosophical. I think there's a lot of the time when you get like billionaires or celebrities' kids that get depression and do drugs, I think it's because they don't have anything. There's no meaning because there's no sacrifice for people of a certain level. But yeah, that's a lot of my own thoughts, but sacrifice does equal meaning. But I think as a society, we've come to equate sacrifice and suffering as the same thing, and I don't think that's accurate. I think you can have a fulfilling life if your work is sacrifice without suffering. I think that is the goal. I, once again, have not figured what that is for me. That's, I think, what I'm striving for, and I recommend other people strive for, because as hard as it is, hard work, as in sacrifice with suffering, gets you nowhere. I'm quite fortunate. I have a corporate job, which I enjoy, which is why it's kind of peeled back and done the reveal on me, is that I have the best possible job I could ever want in my industry, and it's not giving me meaning. So why is that? You know what I mean? I grew up and my mum was a factory worker, and my dad was an engineer. Living with that, which was obviously fine, but there is no way. So my dad obviously out-earned my mum as a factory worker. My mum worked harder than anyone, and she works harder than me, and I earn more than she does, you know? And he earns more than she did, and she earns minimum wage, and she is by far the hardest worker I've ever seen. And then I think anyone who tells you different is just lying. You know, she works the hardest and gets the minimal financial reward for that. And it seems to me, the higher you go, the less hard it gets. You know, middle management. I know CEOs probably have a lot of work, but you know, if you're a board member of a company, that's not a lot of work, but you're getting paid millions for that. Compared to, I always like Amazon is also a good example. The Amazon employees who have to time their breaks, get paid minimum wage, work, I don't care what you say, they work harder than Jeffrey Bezos. because they don't have time to get on a super yacht and destroy a bridge and put it back together. So no matter what lie he pretends, or he has time for passion projects like going to space. Anyone who is on minimum wage working for Amazon does not have time or money to have passion projects or hobbies like going to space or dismantling a Belgian bridge, you know? So I have become disillusioned with the concept of hard work and the suffering aspect of sacrifice. So that's, as you can see, one book sent me down a proper existential crisis. So here we are, welcome to the inside of my brain. This is literally what it's like being my friend, because I will send this in a voice chat to you for 20 straight minutes of a one voice note of me being like, but suffering equals change, and that's meaning, but without meaning we have nothing, and that's where you get sadness. Because I think one of the most famous, just to drive home the point about how sacrifice adds meaning, but suffering and sacrifice are not synonymous, is that famously, no offense to any lawyers out there, every lawyer I know, and also stereotypically lawyers, are one of the most unhappy people. Every lawyer I know either is like unhappy or a drinking problem, one or the other. And I think that's because they have sacrificed a lot and suffering in terms of long hours. It's not very riveting looking up, you know, legislation. And then the meaning of that sacrifice is generally more suffering in terms of, you know, you're suing someone or you're getting divorced or there was a murder. Like, it's always very negative. So the meaning and the sacrifice is all negative for that. So that's a good example of like how even that's what I mean, even high paying jobs can be like this. I think it's about finding what you can sacrifice without having suffering is, like, in my opinion, the meaning to life. So bringing it back to Jimmy Carr's book, he found, and that the suffering equals sacrifice is a different theological model. That's not Nietzsche, but he had the like suffering or a curse, because obviously what I went into was very existential, and Jimmy doesn't do that to you, but he does talk about, the second half of the book is very empowering about helping you find what that sacrifice without suffering is, although he doesn't word it that way. It's about finding what you enjoy doing, what you are good at doing. Like, there's no point being a well-rounded person, because well-rounded people get nowhere. Do you know, is it Francis Bourgeoisie? That's not his name. The train guy of TikTok. He loves trains, and now he's on Gucci and he works for like British Rail because he was so enamored with trains and he followed his passion. He didn't think, I'm gonna get good at maths or I'm gonna get good at English because then I'll go to uni and do a business degree. He followed his passion and it paid off, because people care when you're passionate, and people care, people want experts, you know? You don't want to get an electrician in to do your plumbing, you get an electrician to do your electring, and your plumbing is done by a plumber because they're experts. So stop trying to fill the gaps and find what makes you great. There's a chance I've done this in almost no editing because it's just my full-on existential crisis, but if that sounds appealing, like I said, this book is more self-help than it is philosophical. I got a bit philosophical because I'm like that a little bit, but yeah, it helps you find your passion and helps you transition into that. So it still causes your crisis, but at least it helps you solve it at the end. I made the mistake of getting halfway through, having an existential crisis, and then putting it down for 3 weeks because I couldn't handle it anymore. But I finally finished it. I fully recommend it. But yes, I read a lot, so if this is like of interest to you, I will do more videos like this. I can tell you more books and more of my thoughts around them. I enjoy reading. This is a complete brag, not even a humble brag. 7th book of the year, and it is first week of February. Don't even know anymore. So that's it for this one. Hopefully this enlightened you in some way. Hopefully it didn't cause an existential crisis, although I am recommending you have one. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me in the comments below, have you read it? What do you think? Are you happy? Is your job sacrifice without suffering, or do you have suffering? Do you get meaning? Are you enlightened? Because it's not all terrible, so you might be one of the lucky ones. Let me know. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to hit subscribe so I can see you next time.